So, hello,
Hi Tim.
this is our Conversations with John, small video blog.
Just looking at how Moscow is from the point of view of someone who wasn't born and brought up here.
And today we plan to discuss some advice, tips for people who come to Moscow.
How do you get around the city?
Uh,
Um,
Public transport.
yeah, I was thinking about that. I mean, like any city, there's a variety of ways you can get around Moscow, but I think the one that stands out is the metro system, and I also think for any sort of local Muscovite people who are looking in on this, there's things about your metro which I honestly don't think you appreciate because it's normal to you. You don't see it.
Like what?
Well, when you come right down to it, any underground train system anywhere in the world is pretty well the same. They've got the same tunnels. They have rails. They have an electric train running through them. You access them by escalator, moving staircases. In fact, I'll be honest, if you go on the escalators going down to the metro stations in Moscow and you don't look at the adverts on the side, which of course are obviously written in Russian, you could quite easily imagine yourself to be in London, Tokyo or New York. They're exactly the same.
Not too different.
When you come right down to it, a metro is a hole in the ground with a train in it. Metro, tube system, underground, S-Bahn, you can call it all the different names you need, but at the end of the day, they're all basically the same. If you look, for instance, for differences, then yes, you will see them. My greatest experience, of course, is with the London system. The first thing that always strikes me about the difference between, say, London and Moscow, Moscow trains are bigger. The London Metro, which used to seem fairly normal to me, suddenly seems incredibly small when I get in a tube these days. I bring my head down like this. I don't need to, it just seems smaller. But the real difference, I think, the real difference isn't in the actual mechanical souls of the system. It's in the way it's operated. Efficient to the point where it's astonishing.
Timely.
You're not kidding. I mean, the Moscow metro system, I haven't seen any figures for a long time. But I mean, Moscow is a huge city. That system shifts millions of people a day, literally millions.
It does.
But the whole point, it shifts twice as many people as it's actually designed to do. And that's incredible. And it does it with incredible regularity. You rarely have to wait more than 2 or 3 minutes for a train, anytime. Its reliability is absolutely astounding. You can get almost anywhere in the city within minutes. There are some things which the expat like myself needs to get used to. Some of them very positive, some not so positive. I mean, the positive one is the whole pricing system. You pay a set sum for a ticket, and it will take you anywhere in the city. You can travel
probably much cheaper than in London.
I was coming to that. Yes, much cheaper than anywhere I know of. But you don't have to sit and work out which zone you're travelling from as you do in London. The price will vary tremendously depending on which station you're at and which station you're going to. In Moscow, you pay one price. Travelling one station, travelling two, travelling 10. You're going to be there for 4 minutes. You're going to be on the train for half an hour. Doesn't make a difference. One simple price. It's so much easier to do. The payback for this, I'm afraid, is that because it is so darned efficient, particularly at busy periods, I would suggest it is the second most crowded system I have ever travelled on. The only one which has seemed more crowded to me is the one in Tokyo, where they literally have a little man whose job is to push people into the carriage. It's a bit like forcing meat into a sausage. The Russians, being very sociable people, they do it voluntarily. The Japanese have to be pushed in. It's a sight to be seen. But it can have its problems. In my very early days here, I was travelling for the first or second time on the metro system here. And I got in the train and I picked the wrong time. It was rush hour. I could not believe how many people were in this one carriage. I swear my feet were not touching the ground. I was suspended by them. Now, I was only going one stop, so I carefully positioned myself by the door so that I wouldn't have to force my way through the crowd. Train pulls into the station and the door opens on the other side.
Yeah, that sometimes can bring a surprise.
So I'm frantically trying to push my way through the crowd. I just get to the door when it shuts. So I think, no worries, I'll get off at the next station and come back. So I make sure I'm stuck by the door. Pulls in at the next station and the door on the other side opened. So I'm frantically trying and I don't make it. Door shuts. So we're now 2 stations by the time we get to the next one. And this time I'm smart. I get myself in the middle. And I actually managed to get off. So I get on the train coming back. No problem. But I decide I'm going to be smart. I'm going to be right by the door when it stops back at the original station I was aiming for. Of course, by this time I've forgotten which side the door was, so I'm on the wrong one again. And we go straight past the station back to where I started in the first place. I went back and forward like that at least 4 times before I was able to get out at the right point. It takes a bit of practice. So if you're new to Moscow, my advice, if you're going to use the metro, you will love it. It's efficient. It's great. Don't travel at the busy times unless you are absolutely sure which side the door is going to open. It's quite incredible. The nice thing about it too is the people you meet there. It was, I think about 6 or 7 months later as I came across that absolutely classic Russian phenomena, the Babuska. Mm-hmm. I don't need to tell anyone who's from Moscow about these, but for the benefit of expats, this is not just an old lady. This is a special type of old lady. This is an old lady who has survived revolutions, wars, famines, you name it. She's been through it.
And remembers it.
And survived it, and guided her children, grandchildren, and probably her great-grandchildren through. These ladies are tough. They know it all. But they have hearts like the size of a car inside them. They still have this lovely
old energy.
Oh, they're fantastic. They really are. I think we need a later talk like this to talk about babushkas because they deserve a whole session. Anyway, this particular one, I just started using a stick to help myself walk. It was after I'd had a rather serious operation. My heart was already a little bit dodgy, and I'd started using a walking stick to help myself move. So I'm on this metro. I think it was about the third or fourth week I was using a walking stick. It's pretty solid. Everybody is sitting down. Most of us are standing up, but it's not totally packed. And stood next to me is this 90-year-old lady, clothed in a long black dress with a headscarf. My first babushka, basically. Now, I spoke no Russian. She spoke no English. She looked at me, she looked at my stick, and she turned and looked at a row of young people all sitting down. And she turned on them, and she lectured them, and she talked to them. Now, I didn't know any Russian, but it was absolutely clear, without even knowing a word of the language, what she was saying. You lazy young people, how dare you just sit there? Here's this poor man with a stick standing up while you're sitting there letting him stand. You ought to be... It was so clear what she was saying, even though I didn't understand a word. So I sort of tried to speak and calm her down about this, you know, and she realised that I wasn't Russian. I was an expat. I was from overseas. And I thought that, well, perhaps she'd ease up on the young people because of this.
But instead...
No, you've got it, no. That made it worse.
Yeah.
Again, I couldn't understand the words you were saying, but it was absolutely clear what she meant. Not only were they lazy and not gracious and looking after old people, but here was a foreigner visiting Russia. What sort of impression would he have of Russian people? He would go away thinking that all Russians were crude, rude, ignorant. The train pulled in the station, and everybody from the carriage got out of the train. Some of them went to the next carriage. Some of them were obviously stood there just waiting for the next train. She demolished them. She cleared them out. And then she turned to me and with a big beaming smile ushered me to a seat and helped me sit down. She totally destroyed them.
I think that can be found on any type of public transport in Moscow.
I think you're right, yes. There's several lessons, I think, for the expat, and a few things which perhaps the average Muscovite takes for granted and should realise after this. One, never travel in rush hour if you can avoid it. Two, never cross a babushka. She will win. You've lost straight away whenever you try.
Yeah, probably. Okay, so
Enough
talk to you soon.
Yeah. Wait till you hear me about Russian taxis. That's the next one.